Nope.
Toronto Maple Leafs. The Toronto Maple Leafs had 46 wins, 26 losses last year. We don't count overtime losses on this podcast because they are absolutely irrelevant. Last year's power play rankings, 7th in the league, 24% conversion rate. Great numbers. And who's in, who's out? Well, in is Chris Tanev. In is OEL, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. And in is Stolars. Out is Bertuzzi, out is Edmondson, out is Lyubushkin, and out is Samsonov. The player tiers, starting with 91 points and over, we have the maybe Wayne Gretzky future breaking of records, goal scoring in career, Austin Matthews.
He'll break Ovechkin's record because Ovechkin will beat Gretzky's record.
Right. Maybe. Anyways, Austin Matthews is our number one tier player. Recently got the captaincy.
And new
captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. What do we think about Austin Matthews? Go Junior.
Again, these superstar players like this, it's hard to even say anything that people don't already know. He did have an increase in his shooting percentage last year at 18% compared to 12 the year before, which maybe led to 69 goals. I don't know if he's going to hit 70 or 69 again this year, but I think he's definitely going to get close to 60. 91 plus points for sure. I think he'll get close to 100 points.
I don't know. I think Caulfield and Laney can compete with him for the
for the
I
Rocket
thought you were going to
Richard.
bring the energy, but you're just bringing silliness.
Those are the conversations on Twitter, and they're so silly. For a guy who scored 69 goals, like he should be compared to anybody.
No, zero.
Anybody.
I'll say one thing. We are so fascinated with the round numbers. Like, oh, he didn't hit 70.
Yeah.
Guys, he hit 69. It's the same thing.
goals.
Like, let's be clear here. This guy is an absolute superstar.
He's an automatic, like, there's no...
Top 3 in the league,
besides-
fantasy-wise.
Besides Ovechkin, I believe there is no one else that you can say is an automatic 50 goal scorer.
Okay, Ovechkin in his prime, not Ovechkin now.
Well, in his career, Ovechkin has hit 50 almost every year.
One thing, I'm curious to see what the dynamic is with him as captain now. And at the end of the day, we're all human. No one likes to have their captaincy stripped away because essentially it was stripped away from Tavares. He's still there.
You think it was stripped away?
I find it hard to believe that a guy with as much pride and respect as Tavares has goes to the management and says, give him the captaincy on his life.
Who slept
Like,
in
what does it
Toronto
change?
Maple Leafs pajamas? Who slept in them
Like,
when he was young?
What does it change? What does it change really in the dressing room? What does it change that Matthews went from an A to a C and Tavares went from a C? And I only see that possibly affecting them negatively if it affects them at all.
So here's the thing. The Toronto media has spin this, and they're very good at spinning. As you know, it was hinted to Tavares that eventually they wanted Matthews to be the captain. And Tavares took it upon himself to give up the captaincy to Matthews as the next in line.
The same way I give it
kind of feel like
upon myself to wash my dishes at home and not because my wife tells me to.
I'm just gonna mute you. But in all honesty, like let's be fair here. Tavares kind of went over and beyond in his speeches. In his speech, saying how much he respects Matthews, how much this was not necessarily forced upon him, how he brought his children out in Austin Matthews with a letter C to help give the captaincy over, like a passing of the torch. All of that is positive. I think that plays a big role in my perception of Johnny Tavares, because in my perception, this guy is a class act because of the way that he did all this.
Because he followed the rules?
No, because he accepted to do it.
The fact is that it could have been a sulking, it could have been a screw you moment from John Tavares, and it wasn't. At least the way he presented himself, it wasn't. Now, do I think that this affects anything in terms of point production for Matthews, I don't think it affects anything at all. I don't think he is going to do less than 100 points this year because he has more pressure on him. I think this is all just other media throwing shade. If I'm being realistic, Matthews is still a 100-point player, and the rest of it is not fantasy relevant. We're just talking about it because it's fun to talk about.
It's a letter on the jersey.
Well, I think it has value.
I think it's important.
No,
it's just maybe
it's
not
important. But for anybody to believe that Tavares went there and said, "You know what? I believe I should be stripped of the captaincy," I think is ridiculous. Tavares, look at it realistically. Tavares was basically told, "This is what we're doing." If
and I
you
think
don't
he
like
bought.
it,
I think Tavares bought himself some years in Toronto because
I mean,
if
he's
you
gonna
think
have to
about
take a
it,
pay cut for sure.
be fine. Yes, absolutely. But let's call a spade here. If he was your captain and his contract expired, you were giving it to Matthews anyways, the captaincy.
That's fine, though.
But if he didn't want to give up the captaincy, then he wouldn't be in Toronto next year. This way, at least they could bring him back at $5 million, $6 million.
Oof, no, he's
I'm not saying he didn't accept it. I'm just saying I'm sure it stung when it first came up. And look,
He's a proud player.
Obviously, he accepted it, and he's doing his best to make it seem like, he has no choice to be proud of Matthews and bring all that. And maybe part of him does feel proud for Matthews and wanted to do it for Matthews. But no one in their right mind will ever want to have it stripped away from them to give to someone else as much as they're deserving. But the last thing I'll say, and then we can move on from this captaincy thing, is this: if they come out at the gate like losing 4 straight and like they face adversity right away, like that's when all that media attention that's not needed is going to be there.
But I think
every time they hit a stall,
I think that's good because, guys, Toronto, and this is again, we're still not going into fantasy stuff, but Toronto comes out of the gate not playing well. They face adversity right off the bat. That's great for Toronto. Toronto has cruised to top 3 finishes in the division every single year. So they go into the playoffs and they only start hitting adversity when they're actually in the playoffs. It's not the place that you want to start learning how to deal with adversity.
I mean, year after year, you would think they learned something, but
okay. But what I'm saying is that teams have to lose before they win, and Toronto. Anyways, we'll talk about what I think they're going to do, but I think they're better set up this year than they've ever been before. Even though they're running it back again with the same core, that's not what I'm talking about. I still think they're the best team possibly that they've hit on is this year. Now, let's talk about the next player that almost hit 100 points, but he actually hit 98, and that was William Nylander.
Mm-hmm.
William Nylander Jr., can he repeat 91 plus, and should he be in our Tier 1 again this year?
I think so. I think he can. I think he's closer to 91 than he is, like, let's say 100. I think he could do it. He had an increase in shots on goal last year. His shooting percentages have been pretty stable across the line. 40 goal scorer. I think that's fair to predict again. Yeah, he could get close to 100 points, but yeah, 91 plus. I think 91 plus points is very fair. 40 goals, I think, is capping him. I think he lives between 35 and 40 there. Yeah, look, Nylander has produced ever since he's come in this league pretty much. I don't expect anything less. I own him, so I sure hope he hits more than 100 points, but I'll go on the safe side and predict that he'll be closer to 91 than 100.
No, I mean, he's proven he can score 40 goals, 34, 40, 40 goals, 80, 87, 98 points. He's in his prime, 28 years old. He'll be fine. He'll be in the 91 and plus points.
And like, new coach has a lot to do with projecting here. He didn't play much of his time with Matthews or Marner, right? He was always on that second line with maybe Domi or Tavares, Matthew Nyes. So I'm curious to see what Berube does with this roster and who he splits and who he puts together. And I'm sure he's going to want to put his fingerprint on this team.
If I'm going to predict anything about Berube, is that he will play his hardest working players. because that's what he loves. He loves hardworking players. He's a rah guy. This is the type of coach that he is. Is that necessarily better than Sheldon Keefe? We'll see. Only time will tell. We don't know that. But William Nylander is a hardworking player who has all the talent in the world, and he's shown it the last 3 years. Since entering his prime, he's been, like we said, on pace over 80 points every single year. So I like his projection here at 91. I don't think he hits 100, but that 91 plus, he's very capable of hitting. The other person that maybe should be in the 91 plus but isn't,
Yeah, why isn't he?
Yeah,
is Mitch Marner. And the reason why I put him in the 80 to 90 point turnaround is simply because of the fact that
Berube's coach.
Berube's coach.
Right? I knew it. Had 4 consecutive years at 100 points pace. Like, that's wild, man. We're going to put him down. The coach is going to deploy him so he doesn't get 100 points.
Look, I'm just...
No,
it's a talking point.
You're not the only one with that take. That take is everywhere.
Yeah.
He's the scapegoat every single year, this guy.
It's because Toronto fans don't want him to hit 100 points because then they're going to have to pay him like a 100-point player. And can't.
They're already paying him 100-point players at 11-something million.
His contract's up, no?
Yeah, but I don't
Guys,
think
how many teams in the NHL
Have 300
have
players.
3 players that are hitting almost 100
Fucking
points?
ridiculous.
Like-
For Toronto fans with
Explicit.
I could...
we're happy with a fucking 80-point player.
All right,
These
the
guys
fucks
have
are out of the
3.
bag.
These guys have 3 potential 100 and over point players, and you still hear fans bitch and complain.
You just wanted us to get going with that stupid tier.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, so okay. I mean, 91 plus points, I think, is very, very on mark for Marner. On pace for 100 points every single year, like we said.
On a contract year this year, put it in the bag. 100 points.
It's interesting. It's interesting that they were really discussing getting rid of him this offseason in order to make a change to the core, and he was the guy. And a big reason for that is because of his playoff performance. Not that he doesn't put up points in the playoffs, because we looked at that together, right? And we said he's actually putting as many points as some of these other
Out
stars.
of the core guys, he has the most points per game in the playoffs.
It's the fact that he plays a very perimeter game. And the one time that he cut in front of the net, he scored a goal from his knees this playoffs. So he has the ability, he has the talent. He's more of a setup guy than a goal scorer, and he does it extremely well. Toronto's going to be so fun to watch again this year.
You know, you say he's more of a playmaker than a scorer, but he still scores over 30 goals a year, practically. Man,
Toronto fans.
Embarrassment of riches.
Yes.
embarrassment of riches. And I get the frustration because you have all that you want to win, right?
But for once, they actually got what they needed to go far into the playoffs.
Yes, okay, we're going to get there. So,
You want to talk about the next player?
We're talking about Marner here. All right.
But
So,
you put in like tier 2
when it should have been tier 1. Even before
it got you
Nylander.
talking, no?
Even before Nylander, he should have been
It got
tier
you
1.
talking.
Yeah, like Nylander
Okay,
never.
do
hit
we have
100.
anybody in tier 3? So this part I'm very, very
How do
curious
you not
about.
have Matthew Nyes in tier 2? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. The next player I want to talk about is John Tavares.
Who should be in tier 3?
And the reason why I'm talking about John Tavares is because last year you kind of saw him take a step back. And it's not that he didn't score 29 goals. Yeah, that's great. It's the fact that he only hit 65 points last year, which was on pace for 67 on a full 82-game schedule. So he went from 82 the previous year, 79, 78, 73, and he's hitting his 34 age season. Do we think that Tavares is going back to that 70-point pace, or is he more of that? Is he starting to drop a little bit?
I feel the sea was holding him back. So now that
It carried too much
it
weight.
would carry too much weight. So now that it's off his chest voluntarily, he's gonna hit 70. This is the fuck you season to Toronto for him this year. This is what it is. This is Tavares' big middle finger to to Toronto saying, yeah, you wanted me to participate in this scripted, I don't want to be captain anymore. Fine, I'll participate. But when I put up 75 points to 80 points this year, you can take the middle finger if you want to pay me $5 million next year.
Toronto fans at Vince DiBiase.
No, but
He doesn't even have a Twitter or an X.
all
He doesn't
Toronto
even have-
fans, listen, fantasy-wise, at $11 million, do you take Tavares? No.
Well,
Okay,
I mean,
probably.
some would argue. Some would argue.
At $11 million, it's a hard hit. But
He was a free agent at the time. They had to
Yeah.
kind of
No,
overpay him,
exactly.
but it's
But-
unfortunate
but
that
for people
they
to
did.
say that, oh, he's there's no this season is his middle finger to Toronto saying, listen to me, I'm gonna put up 75 to 80 points, and then when you come up to me and say, oh, do you gonna take a hometown discount? That's the middle finger he's gonna give them because he's gonna say no. That's my prediction.
The biggest difference from last year to from 2022 to 2023 season to the 23-24 season was his power play points. He had 19 less power play points last year. You add that, and he's pretty much a point per game player. So
why did he have less power play points?
that's what I was looking at. Like the percentage of power play time he got was more or less the same, 69, 66. He had a lull in the season, Tavares. I think it was the third quarter of the season where he didn't get many points and he lost power play time as well. But other than that, I'm not sure. Maybe like the power play, the way it worked, didn't work around him, and so he saw less opportunity on the ice. Like when he was on the ice, less opportunity to get points because he's not the type of player that the power play doesn't go through him, right? It's always on Nylander's stick, Matthews' stick, and Marner, right? And then if there's rebounds in front of the net, when you have a sharp shooter like Nylander and Nylander and Matthews, you don't get a lot of rebounds. So because they find the back of the net, especially if he's going to score 69 a season.
I think he was playing bumper spot most of the year.
Yeah,
And I think Bertuzzi was playing net front, if I'm not mistaken.
I see him possibly hitting 70 points again, Tavares.
Perfect. So, next, we have Morgan Riley, who is in our tier 4 between 60 to 69 points. Guys, what do we think about Morgan Riley? Hey, is he a number 1 defenseman? Junior.
Oh, please don't say it.
Oh, yeah. I want hate messages.
No, he's not a number 1 defenseman, but he'd be a great first pairing defenseman if he could be combined with a number 1 defenseman. Like if he was on a line with Hedman, first pairing, that would be a fantastic first pairing. That doesn't discredit him. It's not to say he's not a bad player. He's a really good player. He's a really good player. I never expect him to do that well in terms of points, and he always does. And that's credit to him and not so much to me. But he did lose power play time last year a little bit. He went from 64% of the power play to 57%. I wonder if they give Lygren a bit more of a chance this year, or is it OEL that snips away at that? I just find they could use a better quarterback on that power play, but maybe someone with a better shot.
I think they tried with Klingberg, and Klingberg got injured right off the bat, and he was done. And then they tried, I think, with who was it? Gustafsson? Who was?
Yeah,
the
they had
playing? They had
Gustafsson.
Gustafsson for a song and a dance. But yeah, they haven't really found that number 2 Sandin they got rid of, right? So they haven't had that other offensive. Liljegren, from everything that I'm hearing from the Toronto fans that we speak to, that are part of our leagues, they're not sold on him even being worth $3 million contract that he got. So it doesn't give me a lot of confidence to say he's going to be a power play guy.
Riley's pacing on 82 game pace in the last 3 years. He has an average of 63 points.
Yeah, he's going to get... There's no one on this team that's going to take his time on ice or his power play 1 points. Like I said, Toronto made good moves on defense, but I was more talking about their defensive defensemen
as a unit,
offensive defensemen. Because I think actually this might be a breakout year for O'Reilly because he's got that support now defensively that he doesn't have to try to play both ways, and he could let himself go offensively if Berube permits. Because Berube, we've known he's an old school defense first guy, so we'll see what kind of system he brings into this team. and what kind of character he brings in. But I think this could be a breakout year for Morgan Riley because of the backing he has defensively from his defensive pair.
Do you guys fear to a certain extent that if he makes too much of a change to a system that this could like be a dumpster fire?
Not at all.
Berube?
Yeah.
I don't think Berube
Because
could do
Keith
anything.
and the Berube don't have very similar styles, right? So like,
Look, even if the Toronto Maple Leafs lose a few more games, I think they're better set up for the playoffs. And I think that's why
if you look
Berube
at it
came
that
in.
way.
Right? So, and we'll talk about a little bit the next part, which is going to be a little bit of the asterisks. But before I get there, we spoke about power play D-man. We spoke about Morgan Riley, who Vince calls O'Reilly.
Because I was looking at O'Reilly with Nashville and with St. Louis when Berube.
Excuses. OEL is the other defenseman that came in this year. Oliver Ekman-Larsson. He played some power play time in Florida last year when Ekblad got injured. Do we think Oliver Ekman-Larsson will have a decent season for a defenseman?
Really? Nick? Okay.
This guy's takes, I swear.
Okay. I'll tell you power play 1 unit and then power play 2 unit. And then you tell me if the power play 2 unit will ever exist on the ice, okay? Power play 1 unit. Mitch Marner, Tavares, Nylander, Riley, Matthews. Power play 2. Nyes, Domi, Youngkrok, Lindgren, and Ekman-Larsson.
Lingerie.
Like, come on. How can you not tell me that this power play 1 is going to play 1 minute and 55 seconds and the second unit is just going to come on when the puck gets cleared? There is no second defenseman power play for this team.
So,
I don't think OEL is very, very fantasy relevant.
No.
okay. Good defenseman, but maybe not fantasy relevant.
Yeah, serviceable for the Leafs this year for sure.
Do we have anybody else in this lineup, that we think could flirt with 60 points?
Do you want me to piss you off?
Go ahead. You do every podcast anyways.
Bobby McCann. McMahon.
McMahon.
No, there's nobody that's gonna flirt to the 60. I'm guessing Toronto Maple Leaf fans hope that Nice can get close to 60. But I don't see. Like we said with the last team, this team is very top heavy, so they're gonna be very dependent on those players.
I think Max Domi could get close.
Ooh,
I think Max Domi could get close. He had a great end to the season, 16 points in 19 games. I think if he could build off that, stay healthy, now that he has his contract, he gets some good deployment. He averaged only 13 minutes of ice time, but in that final quarter, he was given 15.29. So it's much better, but it wasn't with Berube. If he can limit the brain farts, Berube will like him a lot. If he doesn't limit the brain farts, then he's going to be in Berube's doghouse.
So Matthew Nyes is only 21 years old, turning 22 before the season starts. Only played 83 games in his career so far. So he's only been around really one season where he put up 35 points. He's still a prospect, technically. No Bertuzzi this year. So no Bertuzzi might mean Matthew Nyes playing on the top line. Maybe top 6 for sure, I think. He doesn't have necessarily the offensive pedigree or the like crazy offensive skills, but I think he could replicate a Todd Bertuzzi. So we'll see if he hits maybe 50 points this year, but I don't see 60 necessarily for this year.
If he stays on the top line with Matthews and Marner, he'll get his 3 points on that line.
There should be progress for sure.
Progress for sure.
For sure.
So, guys, the big asterisk this season, and the only thing that scares me this season for the Toronto Maple Leafs,
huge asterisks,
is their goaltender. And not because their goaltending is bad. Guys, don't get me wrong. Joseph Woll is a very good goalie. And I think Stoli, the goalie, when they grabbed Anthony Stolarz, is a very smart get and probably because of the fact that they look a lot at the analytics like goal save above expected. So let's just run over the stats very quickly before I leave it to you guys. Joseph Woll had a 907 save percentage, 2.94 goals against average. He was 40th in goal save above expected. Anthony Stolars comes in, 925, played a lot less games. 925 save percentage, 2.03 goals against average. Goal save above expected, second in the league. So, do we think this tandem is an upgrade over the Samsonov-Woll tandem? Do we think this tandem is good enough to possibly win more games or win a cup? What are we thinking?
Stolar's actually played more games than Woll.
I just want to make sure we have the same stats.
This laptop was created in the 80s. In the early 90s, okay?
No, Stolar's had 2.03 goals against average last year with Florida and a 925 save percentage. Woll had 907 and a 294 goals against average. Stolar's played 27 games and Woll only 25. Woll has never played more than 25 games in a season, and now he's expected to be a number one goalie on a team that's expected to win the cup. That's a lot. That's a lot of weight on that guy's shoulders. So I'm glad they went to get a guy like Stolar's. I don't know, man. Guys, in a perfect world, this has to be. You kind of almost have to do a 1A, 1B until like Woll gains that stamina to play 50 to 60 games. Like, how can you just give him that? I don't think it's fair to assume Woll plays 50 games this year.
I think Woll. Let me go with your thoughts first.
I'm shocked that I thought he played more than 36 games in his career. I'm shocked that he only played 36 games, and I'm even more worried now than I was before with this goalie tandem, because at least backing him up, listen, we can say whatever we want about Samsonov, but he had experience in the NHL as a first goalie. Now you got you got Woll, who you're hoping is your first, and then Stolars, who's been a career backup, let's say.
Yeah.
So this is worrisome. This and Woll coming off of an injury last year.
Well, that's been the problem with Woll his whole career, is that he's always been seasons cut short due to injury.
Like, who's their third goalie if he goes down?
So Matt Murray.
Matt Murray is still there.
He's still there.
Yeah. And he's going to be
that's
fully
why-
healthy.
I think that's why they're a little bit less worried, because Woll, even if he doesn't stay healthy the entire time, has the ability to be backed up by Matt Murray, who was a regular starter for a very long time.
That guy's been on CSST for the longest time. Jesus Christ.
If our American listeners don't understand what CSST is, it's injured leave,
Essentially.
work leave.
Jesus. But yes, this is okay. This is what I'm going to say about Toronto.
Just the Quebec thing.
I think it's just a Quebec thing.
No, it's also, is it? No.
CSNST is the Quebec.
It's the Quebec one.
So this worries me, but the pickup they did in defense kind of helps with Tanev, with OEL being defensively sound. But this is still like you're going in basically with a rookie goaltender, 36 games played.
Yep, and a career backup.
Wow.
I mean,
But
it's not the end of the world.
Both
but
guys had very good numbers as well. So it's
yeah, he just look. If Woll stays healthy with the improvement they made as a defensive unit, I think that could go a long way.
I think if Woll stays
And-
healthy, you're not worried at all, regardless of the defensive.
And guys, cap wise, under $1 million this year in cap leagues, Woll is like a no brainer.
Okay.
Even for next year, $3.1 million extension
Okay,
over
but
3 years.
it doesn't worry you that you're expecting Woll to play 55 to 60 games?
No, I think they got Stolar.
Plus-
I think they got Stolar.
I think they're going to give him 1A, 1B, and 41.
Yeah, or Murray
If-
might
if
even
they stay
come
healthy,
in.
Murray
Murray
could-
might even come in and play 10,
Because
15
if you're
games.
expecting him to play 50 to 55 games, then you're expecting a long playoff run. This guy's not going to make it.
I think a lot of what Berube
That's a
does
lot
with
of
his system
games.
is gonna determine that.
So they did bring in Chris Tanev. They did bring in Oliver Ekman-Larsson.
Which are beautiful pickups for them.
Jake McCabe, that helps bring Jake McCabe down to maybe a third pairing, which is still phenomenal. I think this is the best team that they've iced in a very, very long time. I think Berube coming in is a fresh face. They needed a fresh face. I know it's not the change that Toronto fans were really hoping for, but I'm very curious this year to see what Toronto does. I think it's one of the best years. We could touch on the prospects before we go. Do we think Easton Cowan is going to play any NHL games this year?
I think Minton might be closer to playing more games than Cowan.
Cup of coffees or
No.
Minton, I think in the second half of the season might have a more prominent role, but Cowan in the future is definitely going to have a spot there for sure.
yeah, I see both.
I just
of
don't
them.
think I'm ready just yet.
Yeah, I don't see. I both of them might have some games played this year. I just don't see them having full seasons in the NHL necessarily. I like both of these players to be middle six contributors for this team moving forward. Just maybe not necessarily fantasy relevant for this year. Topi Nimela, Danford, those are two other players. Danford they just drafted this year. Still maybe a ways away, but that could be... Even, I think Nimela might have a cup of coffee as well. Can you see where Nimela played last year?
Yeah. Where is he?
When I was looking at it, I just want to make sure
hold on.
that... Here, Topi Nimela
Where's
is
the
a
depth chart?
defenseman, 22 years old. Yeah, he could have... He played with the Marlies last year, put up 39 points in 68 games. So he might be another one of those players that makes the team out of camp. We'll see. He came over from Karpat.
Be a nice surprise. But look, I think Minton and Cowan are your most prominent prospects.
Yeah.
You're good?
I'm
All right.
good. That's all I got to say there, Nick. I think I've said enough over 2.5 hours here.
Well, guys, Dom's model predicts that, or Dom's model said that they had the 8th best offseason. Yes, they're running it back again, but they finally have a top pairing defensive defenseman to put with Morgan Riley in Chris Tanev. Obviously, this is somebody that their GM is very familiar with, and I think he's bringing in his players. OEL is better than Lyubushkin and Edmondson, so Chris Tanev is better than them as well. And they had a phenomenal season. Like, Stolarz had a phenomenal season last year. It's just in a backup role. So let's see if we give him more opportunity, what he could do. Much stronger defensive group in the back, but maybe didn't replace Bertuzzi. Might hurt a little bit up front.
I feel this team will regress in the season, but once playoff comes, that's where you're going to see these signings really lift them to hopefully the next step.
I'm curious to see how the Nick Robertson saga ends. Still
Been
unsigned.
He's asked for a trade.
Yeah, but that doesn't always come to fruition. We've seen players get stuck. Look at DeBrusque. He's asked for 2 trades out of Boston and was never granted that wish. You don't know. And it's a shame because I think he has the talent to be a full-timer on this team at a very cheap cap hit. But I'm not sure what's going on there. But anyhow, look, it'll be a fun season. I think there's a lot of change in Toronto, so it'll be fun to see how everything plays out. And look, it's always a circus with the media, right? So the second something goes a little astray, they're going to come up with something to make it bigger than it is.
I watched a lot of Toronto games last year.
But yeah, me too. Just
They're entertaining hockey.
and you want to watch Matthews score.
Yeah.
You just want to keep watching Matthews score. And never again will I take Jack Hughes over Matthews in a fantasy league. Non-dynasty.
I remember that.
That does it for me, guys.
I almost didn't do the podcast with you. Anybody else want to talk?
Well, I just want to say thank you to the listeners. This wraps up our team previews. The last couple of episodes went over 2 hours long, but
Also a reminder to listeners that we cut our videos individually to teams. So if you don't have the whole time to listen to the whole podcast, you just want to listen
On YouTube.
to specific teams on YouTube, we have that.
Give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. It really helps us. 5-star
special
reviews.
guest next week.
Yes, special guest next week.
Can we
Special
announce the
episode
name?
Yeah, of course you have
Yeah,
to
of
announce
course.
it.
All right. So we have Victor Nuno coming on.
From Dauber Prospect
from Dauber
reporting.
Prospect and EP Ringside, Elite Prospects.
And daily, Fantasy
Contributor.
Hockey Life podcast too.
Fantasy Hockey Life podcast.
He's everywhere.
He's everywhere, basically.
He also does the Dauber Prospects Report podcast. And we joined his league on Dauber Prospect
We're
Report,
really
right?
excited. We're
So
really excited.
We're
It's going to
excited.
be a
This is
good
our
episode.
Biggest
And-
guest we've had.
And if you guys have any questions
Bingo.
for him, feel free to write them in the YouTube comments. We'll try to get to him as many questions as possible.
Lastly, very important to subscribe to YouTube and to follow us on our social medias.